Saint Peter's by Charles Dickens. When we were fairly off again, we began, in a perfect fever, to strain our eyes for Rome. And when, after another mile or two, the eternal city appeared, at length, in the distance, it looked like, I am half afraid to write the word, like London. There it lay, under a thick cloud, with innumerable towers and steeples and roofs of houses, rising up into the sky, and high above them all, one dome. I swear that keenly as I felt the seeming absurdity of the comparison, it was so like London, at that distance, that if you could have shown it me in a glass, I should have taken it for nothing else. We entered the Eternal City at about 4 o'clock in the afternoon, on the 30th of January, by the Porta del Popolo, and came immediately. It was a dark, muddy day, and there had been heavy rain on the skirts of the Carnival. We did not then know that we were only looking at the fag end of the masks, who were driving slowly round and round the piazza, until they could find a promising opportunity for falling into the stream of carriages, and getting, in good time, into the thick of the festivity, and coming among them so abruptly, all travel-stained and weary, was not coming very well prepared to enjoy the scene. Immediately on going out next day, we hurried off to St. Peter's. It looked immense in the distance, but distinctly and decidedly small, by comparison, on a near approach. The beauty of the piazza in which it stands, with its clusters of exquisite columns and its gushing fountains, so fresh, so broad and free and beautiful, nothing can exaggerate. The first burst of the interior, in all its expansive majesty and glory, and most of all, the looking up into the dome, is a sensation never to be forgotten. But there were preparations for a festa. The pillars of stately marble were swathed in some impertinent frippery of red and yellow. The altar and entrance to the subterranean chapel, which is before it in the center of the church, were like a goldsmith's shop, or one of the opening scenes in a very lavish pantomime. And though I had as high a sense of the beauty of the building, I hope, as it is possible to entertain, I felt no very strong emotion. I have been infinitely more affected in many English cathedrals when the organ has been playing, and in many English country churches when the congregation have been singing. I had a much greater sense of mystery and wonder in the Cathedral of San Mark at Venice. On Sunday, the Pope assisted in the performance of High Mass at St. Peter's. The effect of the cathedral on my mind, on that second visit, was exactly what it was at first, and what it remains after many visits. It is not religiously impressive or affecting. It is an immense edifice with no one point for the mind to rest upon, and it tires itself with wandering round and round. The very purpose of the place is not expressed in anything you see there, unless you examine its details, and all examination of details is incompatible with the place itself. It might be a pantheon, or a senate house, or a great architectural trophy, having no other object than an architectural triumph. There is a black statue of St. Peter, to be sure, under a red canopy, which is larger than life, and which is constantly having its great toe kissed by good Catholics. You cannot help seeing that. It is so very prominent and popular. But it does not heighten the effect of the temple as a work of art, and it is not expressive, to me at least, of its high purpose. A large space behind the altar was fitted up with boxes, shaped like those at the Italian opera in England, but in their decoration much more gaudy. In the center of the kind of theater thus railed off was a canopied dais, with the Pope's chair upon it. The pavement was covered with a carpet of the brightest green, and what with this green and the intolerable reds and crimsons and gold borders of the hangings, the whole concern looked like a stupendous bonbon. On either side of the altar was a large box for lady strangers. These were filled with ladies in black dresses and black veils. The gentlemen of the Pope's guard in the red coats, leather breeches, and jack-boots guarded all this reserved space with drawn swords that were very flashy in every sense. And from the altar, all down the nave, a broad lane was kept clear by the Pope's Swiss guard, who wear a quaint striped surcoat and striped tight legs, and carry halberds like those which are usually shouldered by those theatrical supernumeraries who never can get off the stage fast enough, and who may be generally observed to linger in the enemy's camp after the open country held by the opposite forces has been split up the middle by a convulsion of nature. I got upon the border of the green carpet, in company with a great many other gentlemen attired in black. No other passport is necessary, and stood there at my ease during the performance of Mass. The singers were in a crib of wirework, like a large meat safe or a bird cage in one corner, and sung most atrociously. All about the green carpet there was a slowly moving crowd of people, talking to each other, staring at the Pope through eyeglasses, defrauding one another in moments of partial curiosity, out of precarious seats on the bases of pillars, and grinning hideously at the ladies. Dotted here and there were little knots of friars, Francescani or Cappuccini, in their coarse brown dresses and peaked hoods, making a strange contrast to the gaudy ecclesiastics of higher degree, and having their humility gratified to the utmost by being shouldered about and elbowed right and left on all sides. Some of these had muddy sandals and umbrellas and stained garments, having trudged in from the country. The faces of the greater part were as coarse and heavy as their dress, their dogged, stupid, monotonous stare at all the glory and splendor having something in it half miserable and half ridiculous. Upon the green carpet itself and gathered round the altar was a perfect army of cardinals and priests, in red, gold, purple, violet, white, and fine linen. Stragglers from these went to and fro among the crowd, conversing two and two, or giving and receiving introductions, and exchanging salutations. Other functionaries in black gowns and other functionaries in court dresses were similarly engaged. In the midst of all these, and stealthy Jesuits creeping in and out, and the extreme restlessness of the youth of England, who were perpetually wandering about, some few steady persons in black cassocks, who had knelt down with their faces to the wall and were poring over their missals, became, unintentionally, a sort of human man-traps, and with their own devout legs tripped up other people's by the dozen. There was a great pile of candles lying down on the floor near me, which a very old man, in a rusty black gown with an open-work tippet, like a summer ornament for a fireplace in tissue paper, made himself very busy in dispensing to all the ecclesiastics, one apiece. They loitered about with these for some time, under their arms like walking sticks or in their hands like truncheons. At a certain period of the ceremony, however, each carried his candle up to the Pope, laid it across his two knees to be blessed, took it back again, and filed off. This was done in a very attenuated procession, as you may suppose, and occupied a long time. Not because it takes long to bless a candle through and through, but because there were so many candles to be blessed. At last they were all blessed, and then they were all lighted. And then the Pope was taken up, chair and all, and carried round the church. On Easter Sunday, as well as on the preceding Thursday, the Pope bestows his benediction on the people from the balcony in front of St. Peter's. This Easter Sunday was a day so bright and blue, so cloudless, balmy, wonderfully bright, that all the previous bad weather vanished from the recollection in a moment, I had seen the Thursday's benediction, dropping damply on some hundreds of umbrellas, but there was not a sparkle then in all the 100 fountains of Rome, such fountains as they are. And on this Sunday morning they were running diamonds. The miles of miserable streets through which we drove, compelled to a certain course by the Pope's dragoons. The Roman police, on such occasions, were so full of color that nothing in them was capable of wearing a faded aspect. The common people came out in their gayest dresses, the richer people in their smartest vehicles. Cardinals rattled to the church of the poor fishermen their state carriages. Shabby magnificence flaunted its threadbare liveries and tarnished cocked hats in the sun. And every coach in Rome was put in requisition for the great piazza of St. Peter's. 150,000 people were there at least. Yet there was ample room. How many carriages were there, I don't know. Yet there was room for them too, and to spare. The great steps of the church were densely crowded. There were many of the contadini from Albano who delight in red in that part of the square, and the mingling of bright colors in the crowd was beautiful. Below the steps the troops were ranged, in the magnificent proportions of the place. They looked like a bed of flowers. Sulky Romans, lively peasants from the neighboring country, groups of pilgrims from distant parts of Italy, sightseeing foreigners of all nations, made a murmur in the clear air like so many insects. And high above them all, plashing and bubbling and making rainbow colors in the light, the two delicious fountains welled and tumbled bountifully. A kind of bright carpet was hung over the front of the balcony, and the sides of the great window were bedecked with crimson drapery. An awning was stretched, too, over the top to screen the old man from the hot rays of the sun. As noon approached, all eyes were turned up to this window. In due time the chair was seen approaching to the front, with the gigantic fans of peacock's feathers close behind. The doll within it, for the balcony is very high, then rose up and stretched out its tiny arms, while all the male spectators in the square uncovered, and some, but not by any means the greater part, kneeled down. The guns upon the ramparts of the castle of St. Angelo proclaimed, next moment that the benediction was given. Drums beat, trumpets sounded, arms clashed, and the great mass below, suddenly breaking into smaller heaps and scattering here and there in rills, was stirred like party-colored sand. But when the night came on, without a cloud to dim the full moon, what a sight it was to see the great square full once more, and the whole church, from the cross to the ground, lighted with innumerable lanterns, tracing out the architecture, and winking and shining all round the colonnade of the piazza. And what a sense of exultation, joy, delight it was, when the great bell struck 7:30, on the instant, to behold one bright red mass of fire soar gallantly from the top of the cupola to the extremest summit of the cross, and, the moment it leapt into its place, become the signal of a bursting out of countless lights, as great and red and blazing as itself, from every part of the gigantic church, so that every cornice, capital, and smallest ornament of stone expressed itself in fire. And the black, solid groundwork of the enormous dome seemed to grow transparent as an eggshell. A train of gunpowder, an electric chain, nothing could be fired more suddenly and swiftly than this second illumination. And when we had got away and gone upon a distant height and looked toward it 2 hours afterward, there it still stood, shining and glittering in the calm night like a jewel, not a line of its proportions wanting, not an angle blunted, not an atom of its radiance lost.